Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Swiss Cyber Expo. I'm Raleigh Hill, the Marketing and Events Manager, and would like to thank you all for joining us here. The topic of today's keynote presentation is protection of country-critical infrastructures, life experiences and thoughts about action areas. And at the end of the session, we will offer a Q&A where you will have the opportunity to ask your questions. And I would like to hand over to Samir Aliyev, the founder and CEO of Swiss Cyber Forum. He will give you a quick overview and introduce the guest speaker of today's session on protection of country-critical infrastructures.
Thank you very much, Raleigh, and thank you very much for the nice introduction. And welcome to our audience at the Swiss Cyber Expo, our live attendees. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker today. We are pleased to host Mr. Uwe Kissmann. Uwe Kissmann is Managing Director of Cyber Defense Services at Accenture in Europe, in Switzerland, and he is also in the same time guest lecturer for Cybersecurity C-level management at the University of Saarland, and he has a position at the working group of cyber resilience at World Economic Forum. Mr. Kissmann is also president of Cybersecurity Commission of ICT Switzerland. This is a great position, a great experience as Mr. Kissmann, and we are pleased to host you here today to learn from your experience, because you have great experience. You have great expertise in cyber defense sphere, especially in Switzerland, and we would like to know more about the recent attacks and the key findings from your experience. You have just mentioned before the session that you have really good insights, and it feels most interesting to our audience. So thank you very much for your time, and it's your stage is yours, and we are looking forward to listen to you. Later on, we will have questions from our auditorium, and I will start to ask the question to you.
Thank you very much, Samir, for the intro, and Raleigh also. And yes, welcome everyone. It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to a little bit reflect on personal experiences, but also professional experiences during several projects within entire Europe in the area of the protection of critical infrastructure. I would love, Debbie, if you could start with the first page. Thank you very much. And if you could go one page down, actually. So my name, actually, as Samir already has mentioned, is Uwe Kissmann. I take care about the cybersecurity strategy consulting business of Accenture in Europe, where we have roughly 2,000 plus cybersecurity consultants who are kind of supporting our clients every day in the definitely upcoming topic on how to protect their organizations against cyber attacks. That's how simple it is. Quite a number of these clients are also coming from governments, or coming from blue light organizations, or coming from public sectors. And what I would love to share with you here this morning is a little bit, as stated, the experiences. What did we see? Where is the problem coming from? What are the typical problems that we do observe? I will try to give it a very practical touch, which really just should predominantly reflect the experiences that my team and myself are doing in such projects. So having said this, I would like to go to the next page, please. Having said this, I would like to start with kind of explaining the general challenge of how to protect critical infrastructure. What we see, and I don't want to start with techie talk here, because I think if you want to protect a country, a nation, if you want to protect your organization against cyber attacks, you are well advised to not talk techie only. We can do that. I can do that for months, actually. But it is very important to, first of all, understand a little bit of where the problem comes from. And so if we look to some of the key parameters of cyber threats, I have tried to highlight them a little bit here. So while this beautiful island, it's a typical iceberg phenomenon, actually, a lot of the things you don't see well, but while this beautiful island here on the picture looks green on the surface, there is a lot of hidden danger below the water. And so what are the key parameters of such cyber threats? And what do they have to do with the current situation, with the current challenges where we are in a number of countries? So number one, cyber threats, they are really hyper fast developing. So the technology, which is very often creating the base actually for cyber threats, is developing in a very, very high pace. This is one thing. They are also new. That means we need to adapt. People need to anticipate that there is changing something. And while singular individuals, single people, certain people can anticipate and can learn from this and do understand this sometimes very fast, it becomes a big problem if there is a wider group, if there is a bigger group, if there are entire nation states actually required to become aware of this situation and to anticipate that. The next thing is that cyber threats, they are really highly dynamic. If I look to what we see when we support organizations and clients in defending themselves against cyber attacks, when we land actually, for instance, to help them to defend an ongoing cyber attack, there is one thing that I very often see and that we very often see, it is that these threats are very dynamic. Modern sophisticated attackers, they do permanently change the attack vectors. Why? Just and simple. They know that that they are making it very difficult for the reactors, for the defenders to follow them if they permanently switch cyber threats. So that's one thing that is making it also difficult. And I think based on my, let's say, personal experience when discussing this also with politicians who are required to kind of create laws in order to protect their nations against cyber attacks, I think one of the most critical elements of cyber threats is that they just and simple cannot be seen. They cannot be touched. They cannot be, you cannot feel them actually. The only thing that you see is the impact of them once they arrive. And this is, as a first recommendation to those of you who are in this area, something that I would strongly recommend. You should not talk about the attack possibilities. It is better very often to talk about the impact that they will generate. But what is most important is that you really never forget these things here, which are here on this page. Number one, cyber threats are fast, they are dynamic, they are new, and human beings in our evolution, we are not necessarily made for reacting in an efficient and effective way to changing threats like this. And this is making it difficult. And we see that here in the protection of critical infrastructure very often. Is the problem new? No, it is here since thousands of years. If you go to next page, please. There has been a nice man who lived a couple of years back. It's Charles Darwin, and who once has stated, hey, that it is definitely not the strongest species that survive. It is also not the most intelligent, but it is the one which is most adaptable to change. So change management, ready to understand, the readiness to understand that cyber attacks are here, that they are completely changing the picture, that they are completely changing things of which we have been believing that they have been secure for many years, and adapting and reacting to it and adapting our defense methodologies in a fast way is key to success when it comes to the protection of critical infrastructure. I think this is a key element on how I would love to open this morning. If you could go to next page, please. So is it new? No. Why is it important? Just and simple. Just open newspapers that you have been opening 2-3 weeks back and read what has happened in the United States, actually, which is nationwide, frankly spoken, one of the most advantaged nations if it comes to cyber defense and if it comes to the protection of critical infrastructure. And even there has been happening an attack to the colonial pipeline operations. What I would like to share with you here, next page please, is like what has happened, where this came from, what is the current intelligence about this attack, and what we can learn from it. So let me highlight here a little bit on the story of the hack on the Colonial Pipeline. So first, there has been a group of hackers actually has been using a kind of software as a service type. I will tell you more about it. A kind of attack software and tech solution actually to attack the Colonial Pipeline. They were kind of entering the system, they were asking for money, and they did particularly stop the pipeline actually for a certain time. This has resulted to the picture on the top left-hand side. This has resulted in people actually being cut off or being afraid that they are being cut off from the fuel delivery actually. So there has been a riot on certain gasoline stations along the Colonial Pipeline, and this has been creating immediately kind of a chaos. So what is it? So it's just a simple cyber attack that has caused thousands, 10,000s of people to really develop a kind of highly alerted behavior, to develop a kind of also unlogical behavior, and to really run and drive to the gasoline stations in order to get and obtain petroleum. So this is what happens. And this is the danger of cyber attacks. The danger is not that the cyber attack is going to kill or destruct a computer or a control system that is under attack. This is definitely not the issue. The issue is that in the real world, cyber attacks can very fast develop a significant, even 1,000 times more harmful, let's say, impact. And this is where the problem, and this is why it is so important to talk about the protection of critical infrastructure. Next page, please. So what has happened? So first of all, actually, Colonial Pipeline, they did suspend operations on Friday, May 7th, actually. There were actually the core function of Colonial Pipeline was to transport roughly 2.5 million gallons of product, diesel and normal fuel actually through this pipeline. And all of that has stopped immediately because there's been a ransomware attack on the IT system. What has been involved is that there is something like so-called dark side ransomware that was involved in the event. And what also has happened is that Colonial Pipeline later on has officially stated that they did pay almost 5 million to the attackers in order to release the information, in order to make them operational again. What has been the impact? As already described, there has been a lack of fuel availability, which has been led to certain panic buying behaviors in certain organizations and in certain, let's say, counties where the Colonial Pipeline went through. It is also the situation is that airlines had to adjust the flight routes due to fuel considerations, so they had to change the flight tracks because they cannot have been arriving in a situation where they have not been sure that they can refuel their airplanes. And it restarted operations after roughly 5 days. So 5 days, this has been the time of interruption. And you see here, actually, all of that has led to panic buying. All of that has led to airlines adjusting flight plans and. So the total damage is much, much more as this $5 million. It is easily 100 times bigger if you look to the total impact on the US economy during this 5-day cyber attack only. So who has it? Who has been behind? So there has been dark side ransomware that has been used. Dark side is a very interesting business model. This has been brokered actually. This has been brokered as a ransomware as a service. If you know where to look, if you know how to do it, you can believe, based on the experience and based on the job that my team and self we are daily involved in, we know very well where and how to do that. You can buy ransomware. You can buy it in the darknet via official sources. Actually, you can order a hack to someone. This is the reality out there. And the interesting thing is it doesn't cost you a lot, but it has still a big impact to your target if you know how to do it. The business model actually, and this is a very interesting observation as well, and this is highlighting that the attack scene, that the cyber attacker scene is really a big business these days. This is a multi-billion-dollar business actually, which is in certain, if you look into it, if you analyze the organizations of that, if you analyze how it is composed, how the value chain generation is going on, you see a lot of similarities to the standard software business. It's very interesting. You observe that if you are a cyber specialist, and as one of the models, you see that the business model does allow, for instance, other actors, so-called affiliates, also to leverage their ransomware technology like a software as a service model in order to carry out these operations. So this is a very interesting aspect of that attacks actually. It is really being commercialized. It is happening in the dark web and you can order it. And to say the naked truth, you don't need to be a highly sophisticated cybersecurity specialist to make it in a successful way. There is required only base knowledge of it. And this is the dangerous element. This is why we also see, if we dig into it, and if we analyze some of the cases where we are involved, this is why we also see the organized crime where it's entering that area as well. And this is making it a kind of challenging, and this is making it important to really think about how to protect critical infrastructure in the country. So one page down, please. Oh, no, sorry. The last element is about the motivation. Thanks, Debbie, for going back. Yeah, motivational. So very important. This is, as far as it is known at the moment, this is not anything like a foreign nation attack. The predominant motivation of it is financially driven. So it's a financial driven attack that has happened here. They just and simple wanted to make money. And it is very important to really think, and this is what you as a professional cyber specialist should all time do. If you see an attack, if you are in the position and if you are in need to defend your organization, you should permanently ask, like, who is behind? What is the motivational element of those organizations, of those groups who are supposed to hack you? In this case, it's financially. One page down, please. How it happened, so again here actually due to this affiliate model that we have had, so actually they have been just and simple renting certain servers in the dark web and also in public available sources, and they did execute this hack actually directly to the so-called domain controller actually at Colonial Pipeline. This is a controller which has a very powerful, let's say, function in order to control your networks and to steer and dispatch the traffic in your networks. And they were taking over this and they were kind of bringing it under their control. Page down, please. So I was talking about this affiliate model. I was talking about the possibility that you, as if you are a producer, if you are a developer of nice, cool hacking technology, that you can benefit from it, also in financial terms. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, the reality out there in the market. It is, as stated, a business model. It is an industry which is running very much under the surface in the dark web, actually. And you can, for instance, go and you can provide parts of your software via a so-called manager forum towards the developer, towards the overall developer, or the developer can buy certain elements of the hacking software actually from its affiliates via this manager forum. So this is an interesting model, which is happening, by the way, if you compare it to the standard software industry, exactly the same. I think this is how modern softwares are developed these days. You collect certain specialty pieces of software from certain independent sources, actually, and you try to put it together. And it is a permanent market there. Unfortunately, the same business model is happening again also here, if it comes to the definition and the development of cyber attacks, actually, and especially about cyber weapons. Next page, please. So, what does one currently know and what does one currently not know about this attack? has happened. So the initial infection vector, one has seen that the domain controller, the general staff, the general control authority of the networks has been attacked. However, there are certain probabilities that there have been additional infection vectors, that there have been additional routes to attack colonial pipelines. Some of them are known and are not officially publicly shared. Some of them are still under investigation. It is actually, the FBI actually has been involved very fast. The FBI Cybercrime Investigation Unit has been involved very fast, and they really have been controlling that in a very fast way. And that is what one currently, however, the initial vectors, some of the vectors are still not totally known. So the actor definitely has, what we see is, we see that we have had an actor behind, which is a dark side ransomware as a service actor who has been deploying that. And again, here, this is very much working like a software as a service business model. What one sees actually is there is this name called OSINT, which is open source intelligence. That means what you officially can see out there. It is likely that more than 100 gigabytes of data have been exfiled. So it is very likely that it is in fact much higher, that the real amount of data has been much higher, and that's what one can see. Who has done it? Has it been a government? No, most probably not. Based on what is known about this and what one currently sees, no, this is not usually, this didn't have the typical signs of a government-sponsored attack. But however, and this is something that you in Switzerland, in Europe, wherever you call in from, actually should know. It does not necessarily has to be a state-sponsored attack that can harm your system. Very often in certain nations, we also observe something that is what we call as state-ignored attack. So the official authorities in certain countries, they do kind of ignore the fact that there are some hackers being very successful and doing their business in their countries. They just and simple look away, or for whatever kind of motivations that I do not want to highlight here, but it is a matter of fact that in certain nations, which some of them are not too far away from Switzerland, by the way, we observe situations where the official authorities just and simple look away and do accept the fact that there are professional hacking organizations can do their business. And this is what we see here also as well. Next page, please. So what are mitigations if you are in part of the critical infrastructure in Switzerland or wherever you call in from? So what are short-term mitigations that you should consider actually? So first of all, if you have such things, think about segmenting your networks. Actually try to take them apart, because this is the best and most effective way to protect yourself from a widespread attack. As we see actually in colonial pipeline, this has not been the case in all infrastructure elements. The segmentations there, actually it was enough to have a so-called golden ticket attack, where you just and simple enter one server and then you have access to the rest of the IT infrastructure. If you have a proper network segmentation, or if they would have had this would not have been possible. Next thing is, you should also implement, you should secure known infection vectors, and you should really look for typical attack vectors, and you should have software and technology installed to observe this. You should also ensure, and this is difficult in a lot of critical infrastructures here in Switzerland, but also in the rest of Europe, you should maintain good patch management on both things. Not only on your core IT systems, but you should also do it on your OT, on your operational technology systems. And they are much more difficult to patch, because a lot of this operational technology that is in use here in Switzerland, but also in a lot of other countries, is something like 15, 20 years old. And it is absolutely difficult to patch such a system. And if you want to patch it in a professional way, you really need to talk with professionals who really understand how to do that. And what we see, personal experiences, is that very often one has a kind of a resistance to really patch such systems, and this is a kind of a big challenge. Number 5, it is also you should harden access to networks, and you should also invest into threat hunting. Next page, please. What are long-term mitigations? First of all, please think about how your emergency response plan does look like in your organization. What I can say, and this is a real personal experience because I have been personally involved in such situations where we had to land at clients that have been under attack. So it is a real challenge, actually, if you don't have a proper emergency response plan at hand in such situations. You should do that. Please invest and update your current response plans. What I often see is emergency response plans which have been updated 10 years back. So this will not help you at all. An emergency response plan per se, that's the naked truth of it, will also not help you to save the problem, actually. But it will help you to prepare the thinking in your organization while doing it in order towards a direction where you learn where you develop as a learning organization to prepare yourself for defending such a situation. You should also ensure that you have a proper detection and response system in place, which is focusing on your endpoints, like personal computers, like iPads, like handhelds, like all of these acting devices, which can be used to control your critical infrastructure. You should also avoid storage of credentials. Basically, it is simple, but credentials like passwords, like other stuff, in files and scripts that can be shared, that are shared and that can be attacked because they are shared. This is something where you should not kind of store critical credentials of your organization. Yeah, last but not least, it is simple. It is actually what you learn in the first hour, in the first, let's say, lesson that you have if you start to study IT. It is, please ensure that you have backups. Regular, robust backups on storage devices. And please, very important, this is what I also see a lot in our experiences, please ensure that you do not only backup. It is even more important to ensure that you also can download it again, that you can restore it after something has happened. So this is a little bit about ransomware. Next page, please. And this is what happened to kind of, yeah, can you page down 2 times? Debbie, please. Yeah, so this was the hack to Colonial Pipeline. Are they the only ones? No, healthcare with the COVID crisis in everybody's mind actually is the next target actually that we very often see. Page down, please. And page down again, and page down again. So all of these are typical things that have happened. Page down, please. Yeah, so if we talk with healthcare officials, actually, and if we talk about, hey, have you ever thought about cyber attacks to the healthcare system? And if you ask someone who is undergoing a treatment in a hospital, that they say, well, you know, it must be secure because it is about my health. I can die if this is not going well. So if you ask a patient actually how security is done in healthcare, he looks at this. Well, they look like a fort, actually. So they are very strong, multi-tier defense organization, stuff like this. 1 page down, please. If you ask the same question to the management hospitals, to the management of large healthcare organization, and ask them, hey, do you know about the cyber threat exposure of your organization? The answer is more looking like that. They say, oh, well, we have absolutely high tech in place. We have the newest devices in place for medical treatment. This is how the management looks at it. If you go 1 page down, please. And this is how the IT of organizations in hospitals usually see it. They say on the left-hand side, we have the good guys. On the right-hand side, we have the bad guys. And whoever wants to cross the line will have a problem like this, like the animal here in the middle. However, we have been engaged actually by a number of healthcare ministries of healthcare to really ensure and to check how secure the healthcare organizations really are. And the result, what we have seen there is, page down please, unfortunately, this. It is quite chaotic. So while there is top right-hand side, a lot of high tech in place, a lot of high tech involved in the modern hospitals, at least in Europe, actually, we see that the organization of security is rather very often a kind and type of chaotic. Not in all places, there are absolutely exceptions, but whenever we are engaged to attack in a simulated way, hospitals or healthcare organization, we unfortunately often see the down right-hand picture. So what are the drivers of it? We see actually, so very often the challenge is the organization within the healthcare system itself. The next challenge that we see is that there is, page down please. And one up, please. Yeah, this one. So what are the typical attack vectors? So we see a lot of insecure devices. We see actually accessible devices which are standing around, no one knowing that they are there. We see a lot of contractual, so typical hospital today is operated by a number, 200-300, even more subcontractors doing business actually, bringing in their own devices, connecting it with the core infrastructure of a hospital without the hospital itself having a possibility, or at least not a methodology, that's the better expression, to kind of check the security level of these devices who are connected from externally in a preventive way. We also see a lot of internet-facing resources, and the challenge here, what we see with the modern high-tech devices in the hospitals, actually, that there are a lot of internet-facing resources of which the hospital IT is not aware of. That's the challenge. And if you're not aware of something in cyber defense, this is creating a problem because this is something that we cannot control. We also see unknown radio vectors, and believe me, what we see here is actually the radio networks which are in place. They not necessarily have an antenna that you can physically discover. Very often you also see some embedded chips in certain medical devices, and we have discovered this in some places, which have a radio wave VLAN function embedded in the chip. And you don't see an antenna there, but they are still emissioning and they are receptive for external radiation. So this is the type of stuff which is out there. In other words, protecting the healthcare system is key, I think, for everyone, no doubt about this. But there is quite a mileage to go, actually. So you need to go, you need to check where these systems are, you need to know what the systems are, you need to know how to combine the worlds of OT security and IT traditional security. And this is not too easy to go. One page down, please. So if you look to the left-hand side, actually, this is a kind of a X-ray device, as you see it in a lot of hospitals. And this was the one that we attacked. Actually, the problem is that nice-looking doctor with the blue, with the green hat and the blue shirt is not a doctor. It's a colleague of mine who is working in our hacking team, and who actually was, without any problems, having had the possibility to enter this room to deploy software here. Page down, please. And this is the picture that we see actually. So this is what we see. If you look to the left, if you look to the right, you see a number of very critical public data which is very private, because it is the health status of the patients that have been investigated in this hospital. We can see that. If you look to the left picture here, you see that pair of scissors actually there, and it is in the middle of the stomach, quite close to the spine of someone here. And I can tell you this is not the case actually. This pair of scissors has been built into that pictures, while we have discovered that there is a doctor kind of doing an investigation at this person. And we were saying, okay, let's give him a surprise and let's download a pair of scissors in the picture. And as we also did hack in parallel the the video monitors and the video cameras in that room, you can imagine that it has been a kind of a very interesting picture to observe this doctor, how he was reacting when there was from one moment to the other a pair of scissors in this picture. But what I want to say is, this is highly critical. And this is something that you need to take care of, that we need to take care of in Switzerland. The even more shocking, and I really have to say, I use the word shocking element for us, was when we did present this to the hospital management in this case there, they say, well, okay, well, yeah, it's definitely not good, but okay, well, you know, we are a hospital, people are dying, it's normal, so what? That was the kind of the first reaction. And this reaction has only changed once we have discussed, once we have told them, hey, listen, are you really sure? And we can show you how you can move that picture here from that X-ray, from that X-ray screen by 2 centimeters to the left or up or right or whatever, or wherever we as the attackers want to move it to. And if you are in the same, if you are the doctor who is treating a patient, and if you are putting a needle into the patient, because you need to know where exactly you can put that needle to, and if we change this picture in exactly this moment, and if we move it back after you have been putting out the needle, after hurting your patient, can you really be sure, Mr. Doctor, that you can, that you will survive in front of a court, which is claiming you, which is telling you, hey, you have not been careful enough, you have been killing this patient. And this has been the moment where they did change the behavior. And I can tell you, we are now involved in the protection of this, not only this hospital, it is actually nationwide where we do that in this specific country. It is not Switzerland. This is something I can tell you. But it has actually, at the first moment, we had a certain level of ignorance. And only when we have connected it to the human impact that can happen to the doctors, actually, they have started to listen to us. Next page, please. So what are critical infrastructures? There's just an excerpt. What do you need to take care of? So in the industry society, you have refineries, you have telecom, you have the trading, you have the financial places. In the blue light and emergency and defense things, you have, of course, as stated, hospitals, fireworks, you have the Rega in Switzerland, you have the Air Force, you have the defense forces. If it is about energy and food and water supply, you have electrical power, you have nuclear power plants, you have distributing chains from the official retail stores, and. And if it is about in transport and logistics, it is clearly the airlines, it is the railways, it is ships, it is shipping, it is distribution centers. All of these things, all of these pictures that you see here on the page are part of a critical infrastructure, and you need to look at this. Next page, please. So what are the approaches in Europe? And if I say Europe, I'm talking about European Union, Great Britain, and also Switzerland here. So this is a little bit of an excerpt. There are many, many more things that we did observe. And what are the pain points and what are the nation answers to it? So in energy, telco, blue light, and finance, actually, it is a kind in Europe, if we discuss this with governments, if we discuss this with governmental authorities, we see that energy, telco, blue light, and finance are more or less the center of the most attacker initiatives. So whenever there are attacks, these are the attack points where a lot of attackers and hackers are looking for. The nation answers to it is that they did prioritize in the first moment the regulation building for these sectors. So this is what we see out there. In Switzerland, we see a little bit of the same, but in different flavors. Let's say we have the national cybersecurity strategy, which is about to be built and which is about to be renewed, and this is what we see here. Next pain point is that a couple of nations in Europe have already discovered and are anticipating the fact that so far a lot of the cybersecurity initiatives have been focusing on the core IT protection only. And they are well aware that the predominant attack vectors in a couple of industries that I have been showing you are not the core IT systems, but they are depending on up and running OT system, on operational technologies, on control systems that are controlling, for instance, a logistics center, that are controlling, for instance, the power switches in a nuclear or whatever type of power plant, and. And because of that, a lot of nations have started to create and establish focused education programs for non-IT security functions. They know that it is difficult to find cybersecurity specialists these days, but it's even more difficult to find cybersecurity specialists who really have a focus on protecting OT control devices. And they have started, a lot of nations have discovered the situation, and in anticipation of that, they have been starting to establish focused educational programs for this. They also see a lot of intelligence which is allowed. A lot of nations are becoming aware that there is a significant lack of the dark side of the moon, or knowledge of the dark side of the moon. They know that they have a lack of threat and risk intelligence visibility. What has been the nation answers of quite a couple of nations? They just and simple collaborate with industrial partners who do have this insight. And I can tell you, we are actually, with the team, we are supporting quite a couple of nations with this in-depth cyber intelligence, because this is what you need to have. You need actually to know a couple of days ahead if there is an attack planned on your systems. And this is something that you only can do if you are deep in the dark web, if you really have people who are permanently monitoring that. Next challenge is to find sufficient cybersecurity staff. A real big challenge, a big challenge for the majority of even civil organizations, but it's an even bigger one for national organizations to find cyber talents. The problem here very often is, if you look to cybersecurity, you see that the job market here is booming, actually. If you are a good educated cyber specialist, and if you show your CV on the marketplace, it usually takes you less than a day to find a new job. So this is how it is these days. And the challenge for a lot of nations and organizations and governments is that they can find and especially keep such cyber specialists. And because of that, they have quite a number of them in Europe have started to create an out of the normal career model for cyber staff. They treat it a bit different because they do know that this is the only way, let's say, to really get cyber staff and to hold it also. I think this is something that we observe in at least 4 countries in Europe in a quite intensive way. Next thing is that within governments, there is very often a kind of a non-collaboration culture between the different departments of that nations. This is a kind of a challenge very often. Because of that, a lot of nations have discovered, hey, if this is about protecting the organizations from cyber attacks, there's just one thing, and we need to establish a centralized national cybersecurity center. And this is key. If we don't have this, and if this national cybersecurity center is not responsible for all the departments, for the entire governmental organization, it is already designed for failure. So this is something where definitely, something where we definitely see actually in Europe that a lot of countries have discovered this. I think in Switzerland, we are on the way to it, but it is not perfectly established at the moment. So yeah, and next page, please. So there has been a project. I just would like to highlight a little bit what we have done. So how can this look like actually? In a nation here in Europe, actually, there has been a decision to put together the traffic control systems of the marine, of the land and the sea related traffic controls under one ministry, under one organization. The challenge there has been that a lot of that was completely decentralized actually, and these organizations, they have been historically completely independent from each other. We also had have observed that the security and the resilience, that means the recovery capability, was significantly behind the digital curve. They have been falling behind that. And so the goal has been to really plan investment needs in order to restructure the security organization of such a merged organization. So this is something where we have been involved in. Page down, please. And this is how we actually yeah, thank you. And this is how we have approached it. So we have been ensuring that there was not only a technology aspect on it, and this is absolutely key, but we have been coaching the board of directors on how to create a cultural development that brings together these people, that brings together, that ensures that all of these different organizations that have been merged together, that need to be merged together, will talk the same language. We also have been anticipating and highlighting the factor actually, and this is a situation that we very often observe, by the way, in certain organizations, that they do, for instance, a little bit of pen testing here, a little bit of vulnerability scanning there, but that they are still having kind of significant lacks and weaknesses if it comes to the security testing. So this had to be changed. And at the end of the day, actually, it was also a big challenge that the age and the type of technologies that are in place caused constant critical situations whenever it came to to resilience, whenever it came to business recovery. Some of the technology used, for instance, in the air traffic control system of that nation, for instance, also in the marine control systems, they had an age of more than 30 years. And the people who had developed these systems, they were longly retired. So this has been the challenge. And so what we did there is actually, we were kind of putting this in, we were kind of collecting it. And we then, and this nation is kind of surviving with this since 3 years by now, we were then kind of coming up with an integrated way on really looking and solving this issue. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, something that I definitely would recommend to every single person here. Whenever you touch base, whenever you think about protecting critical infrastructure, I strongly recommend that you think holistically, solve it as a team, bring it together, look at it from different aspects, and don't solve it techie way only. Page down, please. Yeah, so there are a couple of real life examples of challenges that I've seen on my way, and as in the interest of time, I will not touch base on everything. So hospital we already touched. Conflicting targets of resilience objectives is something that we see very often, actually. So if, for instance, if you're an energy provider and have a kind of a recovery time objective of, let's say, 1 hour or 1 day, and if you, on the other hand side, are a blue light organization who has a recovery time of just 5 minutes, and then you need to have your systems up again, this is conflicting. If you consume electrical power from someone who has a time objective of a day, and you need to have your systems up and running in 5 minutes only, then you have a conflicting target. And believe me, if you look close to this, you will see a lot of such conflicting targets. I also see significant lacks sometimes, and really significant and dangerous lacks in cybersecurity skills. I remember a conversation that I've had roughly 2 years back, and that really left me behind completely shocked. I'm open and frank with the nuclear power plant facility manager. And he was kind of at the end of his career, and he said, hey, listen, we are protecting our nuclear power plant very professionally. I have a separate computer only, completely separated from the other systems, and in order to protect our infrastructure. The problem was that he told me then, hey, and we did that in a cost-efficient way, and we do allow the maintenance technicians from some other companies to dial in only via this computer to the nuclear power plant. And this is an absolutely no-go in security. And believe me, the person who told me that is residing in, let's say, a location which most probably is not too far away from the places where most of you are dialing in right now. Huh? So these are typical life examples of challenges. 1 page down, please. So what are the success parameters of a way forward? First of all, if you do the same as you did up to now, you will always earn the same. And the same is having problems. So please change the behavior. Please anticipate these new changing, fast changing parameters in cybersecurity. Very important here is the second part. The nation state authorities, they usually cannot solve this by themselves. And they should very soon in the process work together with very important independent cyber experts. So don't talk to these thousands of security product vendors because they only will want to sell cybersecurity products. Try to obtain an independent point of view. This is something that is absolutely key. And I see this in a lot of European nations that they have understood this and that they are doing this. Very important, and I think it is also a situation here in Switzerland that the education of legislative members, like the Nationalrat here in Switzerland, is key. Very important, do it in a language that they can understand, because there is not everyone a cybersecurity specialist. In fact, it is completely opposite. Possibly 1 or 2 out of the members of parliament are specialists, but it is very important to have a language, to apply a language which is kind of creating an awareness of the situation, because this is where the legislation is done, and we need certain legislations. It is already mentioned, career modeling modification is required. Number 2 on the lower end here is also that you need to talk with the real professionals, not just with those who have kind of created the situation, the problematic situation in which most governments are. So please, and again here, this is asking for independent point of views. This is something I would strongly recommend to the governments and to people who want to protect critical infrastructure. Last but not least, cyber attacks, they don't stop at the Swiss border. They don't stop at the German border. They don't stop at the French border. This is an international play, and the borders are non-existent. The national borders, they don't exist in the internet. So whenever you partner with someone, whenever you look to collaborate with someone, please make sure that this person or organization or supporter has a really true global and international background, because this is what you need if you want to protect yourself against advanced cyber attacks. Next and last page, please. So what is the summary? Again, teaming matters, but change management matters as well. If you want to change something, you need to move, and changing without moving doesn't work. Changing without teaming, without building a team that really walks down that road towards protecting a critical infrastructure also does not. Key is that you never forget to focus on awareness first. Make people aware of the impacts. Don't do techie talk, but talk about the impacts. Talk about things like, hey, gasoline pipeline down 5 days, by the way, $500 million of damage. This is the impact. And you did not talk about ransomware and stuff like this. Very important if you want to protect critical infrastructure, also it's in cybersecurity general, ensure that you come up with an informed risk management talk and don't be paranoid. Very important. It is also absolutely key, and I think it's also here in Switzerland the case actually, that one needs to ensure that the country's political decision makers, that they are really aware of the potential impacts. And again here, if you want to highlight this, if you create awareness, you need to talk about more about the impacts and less about the technology that is used to create the impact. This is also an observation that I make here and that I see in our projects that we do in Europe. Important here is cyber defense can be done also in a very holistic way. If you want to be holistically, you need to build teams of cyber experts from various backgrounds, not just IT security. They need to have an industrial background. They need to come from the blue light forces. They need to come from hospitals. They need to bring in industrial knowledge, industrial way of thinking, and then you build them together in a team, because this is the base actually for really creating a proper cyber defense. Last but not least, the rarest resource in that entire game, and you can talk with whomever you want, they all will give you the same answer. The rarest resource are Top Gun cybersecurity specialists. They are very hard to find in the marketplace. And this is why we, especially also in Switzerland, but of course also in other nations, but I think especially also in Switzerland, need to focus and need to ask more for focused education of cyber specialists. We've seen some first initiatives. We see the Cyberrecruitenschule in Switzerland, which is a great concept, but which is also kind of useless if we don't use these soldiers afterwards, immediately after they have stopped the cyber areas, in order to work in cybersecurity. We need to have follow-on activities for these persons, and. So this is what I would like to sum up with. I hope that I have been able to show you a little bit of the experiences that I did in Europe in the protecting of critical infrastructure. I hope that I have been able to lift up some of eyebrows like, oh, interesting, this is something we need to discuss. And I'm happy to take questions right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Uwe. And it was really, really fantastic presentation. I'm really impressed. We have limited time, but we have also a lot of questions. I would like to start with several questions first. The first question is about the future of the cybersecurity. What is the best scenario and the worst scenario from now on within 5 years? What do you see that we will face within 5 years, especially in Switzerland? Best scenario and the worst scenario?
Best scenario is that in Switzerland, I think that we would have, at least that we have an education that our schools, universities, and all the rest of the industry is capable of educate 500, to pump and generate 500 up to 1,000 cybersecurity specialists a year into the economy. That's one thing. Education matters. And here, that's where we are behind in Switzerland. And this is what I think is required. The best scenario also would be that that Florian Schütz, who is Mr. Cyber of the Swiss government, is having, not himself, but that his functions are having a kind of a overall responsibility for the Swiss state authorities, not only for a couple of departments. Best scenario is also that we proactively discuss the cyber issues in a more active way, also in the political organizations, actually. And I think I see very, very good examples of of members of the parliament who are really, number one, good, and who are already also very well informed about the threats, and they bring up the discussions. I hope that we will have more of that, because I think it will be required to really defend our nation in an appropriate manner against cyber attacks. And if I say defending the nation, I'm not talking about this in military terms only. I think we also have to protect an economy. And this economy is, in some areas where we are in Switzerland, leading edge. We are among the leaders of the world. And if you are a leader, there are a lot of others who potentially don't like this situation too much. And this is the potential of cyber attacks. And this is where I hope that we in Switzerland become more aware of that, and that we especially also spend a sufficient amount of money into the protection of that. The worst case scenario, do it as we did it up to now, because this is unfortunately, and if I compare it with the international status, this is actually that has brought us behind in comparison with many other countries.
Thank you very much. Well, I would like to add some comments to your best scenario. Right now, just at Swiss Cyber Academy, which belongs to Swiss Cyber Forum, we educate this year more than 100 engineers, cybersecurity engineers. They will be ready next year. And there is a project that there is need for 120,000 excuse me, 120,000 experts in ICT security field in Switzerland within 7 years. So there is huge potential to educate new professionals, new experts, and we believe that the best scenario in education part, we will do our best to fulfill the requirements. And right now there are more than 3,000 open jobs in Switzerland in cybersecurity field, more than 3,000, and 80% of them are just empty. They don't find expert. It's huge industry, and it will growing up. And I suggest to all the professions that they are here, if they look for to advance their career, they have to invest their cybersecurity education. That's very important. Let me ask my second question, since we have limited time. Who is responsible for ransomware attacks in the company? Is it a cybersecurity team, IT team, or management, or service providers, third-party service providers, or the consultants that external consultants give them or wrong advice, or etc.? Who are responsible for ransomware attacks?
Typical consultant answer: it depends. So,
It depends.
yeah. So I think a little bit of all of them. I think at the end of the day, to me, if I look to cybersecurity, I think a successful cyber attack, in this case, a ransomware attack, is all times a result. This is the latest step in a chain of failures that have been done previously. That have been done in awareness generation, that have been done in technology implementation, that have been done in lack of threat intelligence, threat hunting stuff against cyber attacks. And they end with this human being opening an email where there is a Trojan horse attached that is going to pick off the ransomware attack. So coming back to what I've tried to say in the presentation, I think if you want to solve this, you need to be holistic. You really need to be holistic. You need to focus on awareness generation. You need to focus on technological properly implementations against ransomware and many other attacks. You need to ensure that you have well-educated people. And at the end of the day, you also need to make people responsible for opening such a mail. This is at the end of the day something that I think is very often also missing. If you take a piece of wood into your office and if you start to fire it in the middle of the office, everyone is going to tell you, hey, are you crazy? You could harm someone. But in fact, if you open such a harmful email, it is also endangering others. And this is a kind of a connection and a kind of an awareness which is not out there at the moment. So we need to work on both, and responsibility is loaded and shared on many shoulders, I would say.
Thank you very much, Uwe. The next question is about, again, ransomware attacks. By denying access to the core system, ransomware can cause an organization to run its operation in a highly degraded state. So that's why are the ransomware attacks are successful? What are the key elements that they are successful? We hear day to day and in Switzerland, also in other parts of the world, why they are so successful?
Very simple. In the presentation, I said, if you want to know how to prevent yourself against a cyber attack, you need to understand the motivational elements, and you need to understand personality issues and personality features of the people who are attacking. If you are a ransomware attacker, this is an El Dorado thing at the moment, because you have very low investment. You have an incredible low possibility of being discovered. You have an even lower possibility of having to go to jail if you write such an attack. So this is one thing, actually, that makes it very attractive for the cyber attacker industry to attack along this path. Why is it so easy? Just and simple, it is there's a big asymmetry between the attackers and the defender's point of view. While the defender, a typical organization, has thousands of entry gates through which an attacker can walk through, the attacker just need to find one and only one gate he can go through. Like an employee who is opening an email with some vulnerable code on it. So they just need one employee to do it. And the defenders, the organization, they need to actually monitor and defend along 1,000 different possibilities. That's a key element. And this is where you cannot survive without security automation, without high-ending cybersecurity technology. But this technology has to be embedded. And this is where I see some challenges at the moment in a highly professional way that is really protecting, and it is not only costing you money. So this is, and yes, this is again a strong recommendation to ask for independent consultants who can help you to arrive on such a situation.
Thank you very much, Uwe. The next question is about the third-party suppliers. how to manage proactively the risk of key suppliers involved in critical process and the systems. As you mentioned, in the hospitals, there are 300 to 500 third-party suppliers. How to manage all of them? It's huge workload for a normal size hospital, for example.
Absolutely, a key challenge for a lot of organizations, and not only for hospitals. It is something that I observe also in the civil or operations and civil companies all over the world. We are multidimensional, interacting in a world of globalization. So how to do it? Just and simple. Number one, start with adding security relevant things in your SLAs that you sign with these third-party providers. Very often it does not exist, it is not there. And something which is not in the contract is usually not performed by a third party. That's how simple it very often works. Number two, please ensure that you do regular checks. Can you do it by yourself? Can you do it with your own teams? Yes, you can, you could, but very often what I see in the naked reality in the real world out there is that you just and simply don't have the capacity, nor do you have the resources to do so. So think about outsourcing, think about outtasking these regular security screens of third-party vendors with whom you deal. And this is what I would recommend here.
Thank you very much. I think we are running out of time. I just asked the last question, which we see in the panelist section here. What are the typical background of cybersecurity specialists? Are they more coming from academic or technical background, or more industry specialist experts? Who should be cybersecurity specialist?
It depends very much on which areas of cybersecurity you would love to work for. I can tell a little bit how our teams are composed, actually. They are a composition of people who have a strong industrial background. They are composed of people who have a strong technology background, but I also have psychologists in the team, because they are very important if it comes to change management and stuff like this. We also have, and this is an open secret at Accenture Cyber Defense, we also have a couple of people, around 10–15%, who have been working for, let's say, certain national intelligence services prior of joining us. And this is the kind and type of knowledge you need to have today. And we also have former CISOs in the team. So it really depends. I think good cybersecurity, in my opinion, consists of a truly holistic approach. The leadership needs to ensure that you compose a team which can highlight many angles of the problem. And this is true diversity. And I really look very seriously at this. And I think it is good for a reason. And the reason is called holism. And coming back to your question, actually, Samir, I can say it needs all of that you have described. We need people with industrial background, with tech background, but also with others.
Great, thank you very much, Uwe. Right now, today, more than hundreds of attendees, they joined us, they listened to your presentation from Switzerland, from Europe, and from Middle East. And I received more than 30 questions right now in front of me, but I believe we need another 1 or 2 hours to answer all the questions. But I would like to invite you another event with us just for Q&A to discuss with some certain hot topics. And right now, I would like to stop the presentation. I would like to stop the live broadcast on Swiss Cyber Expo. And I would like to thank you to our attendees and everyone who has the role in this session today. Thank you, Uwe, and thank you everyone that watched us.
My pleasure. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Uwe.